After the 8,500 delegates passed a resolution to fold up their 13 political parties and merge with Jubilee Party,
well, those are just some of the clips of what was happening over the weekend. It was hyped up. The march talked about Jubilee launch and also ODM celebrating 10 years of the Orange Democratic Movement. And, well, on the basis of that, we also asked this morning whether you were satisfied with the media coverage of the political events over the weekend. We wanted to know whether you, and we still want to know whether you were satisfied with the media coverage of the two political events over the weekend. And, well, if I would look at the poll tally so far, the Twitter poll tally is 29% of you have said yes, they were satisfied, and 71% have said no, they were not satisfied. So that's where we're going to begin our conversation. But before that, let me introduce the panel that we have this morning. To my immediate left, we have David Ohito, who is a digital editor with The Standard. Good morning and good to have you. We also have Crispus Yankem, who is a communications consultant. Good to have you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning to you. And we also have Professor Israel Kodiaga, who is a lecturer, and good to have you, sir. Thank you. Last but not least, we're expecting Eric Latif, who's going to be joining us, and he is a journalist. So, gentlemen, we know that the event that had been talked about a lot over a period of time was the Jubilee merger party, the merger and the launch of Jubilee Party, and also ODM 10-10. Now, looking at the results and what generally people have said, with 29% saying that they were not satisfied with the coverage, and 71% have said they were satisfied. Let me start with you, David Ohito, first of all, on your comments regarding people not being satisfied with the coverage that we gave.
It's very good for the media to pay attention to those who are not satisfied so that you can effectively address the concerns of your audience. Those who are not satisfied, I hope they'll give you reasons why, so that editors can pick it up from there and know how to play it going forward.
Right.
However, I want to say that there may be very many reasons informing why many people may not be satisfied with the coverage. If you look at, I know one media house whose name I won't mention here, that was paid to cover the event from A to Z. So what you do is the client then controls how the content comes to your screen. And that denies the journalist the opportunity to put things in perspective, to carry on analysis that really are warranted, but then you are bogged down with entertainment, which may not make sense to the audiences. And that may explain why some people are not satisfied. Two, there are media houses who are not paid, so what they would do is to give a glimpse of the newsy items or of the events that were going on. So in that case, if you are the news editor at KTN, or KTN News, for example, you have a package of 1.5 minutes to tell people what happened over 8 hours. It may be very difficult to package that in one go. For the newspapers, I think they'd really try their best. There's only some pages available for carrying such content. I saw colorful photographs from the Jubilee at 1. I also saw good pictures of ODM at 10, and that was a real variance of 10-year-old versus a day-old child. I think
generally, of course, there are the constraints and challenges like you've mentioned, but do you think the media did their part? Would you say you are satisfied with the coverage that was given?
You know, the satisfaction may be looked at from different perspectives. When you have a media house that is your preferred channel, and they have been bought out or been paid, so you're running an advertiser's announcement, which you have really no control over, it's very difficult to bring in experts to argue out. But I saw KTN News, I saw NTV do an excellent job bringing experts on board to try to explain to people what is happening, what are the implications, what the law says. That for me was really above average coverage.
All right, thank you. Crispus, your comments on, first of all, the fact that we have a bigger number of people that were not satisfied with the coverage.
I think that is a very significant number. But before I respond to your question, Michael, I think allow me a few seconds just to touch on two critical issues that I think are quite relevant to our country. Number one is actually the fact that Kenya is a sovereign country with a very proud people. So it doesn't make sense at all when quite a number of Kenyans are languishing in foreign cells like Hong Kong. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Immigration ought to step up the game and take responsibility, ensure that the Kenyans who are being held in Communicado in foreign countries are repatriated to the country to face justice. Number two, and I think this is actually a message that should go out to my friend, retired General Joseph Kaiseri. I spoke to a friend of mine. I know there is quite a lot of effort that is being done to ensure that the lives of our men and women in uniform are better. But speaking to a friend of mine who happens to be a police officer over the weekend, I think there is that need actually to start address certain critical issues. For instance, their air mobility is a matter that ought to be put on the spotlight. Ensure that the copters that are being procured, the copters that are aging are phased out. Those that are being procured are done in a manner that is transparent, a manner that ensures their safety. Because you saw last week, there is a chopper that I think crashed in Mathare. It raised a lot of fundamental questions. I think we wouldn't want to see another George Saitoti, another Oro Ojode accident for that matter to be addressed. These are choppers that are used by even our VIPs. So it is important for him to address that matter. But let me come back to your question. And you asked whether I'm satisfied with the press coverage. I think I would say this. The political events in Kasarani over the weekend and the political event in Mombasa, that is specifically for ODM, essentially raised political temperatures in the country. And it is not going to stop. In my view, I think the political event at Kasarani was well choreographed. It actually spoke of a political party that is ready and willing to ensure that it stays in power, because the organization was actually top-notch. It cannot be compared to the knee-jerk reaction that we saw in Mombasa, and I think that is a matter that CORD, or ODM specifically, would want to address. Number two, I think the media failed. They tried, but they failed to ask fundamental questions. One of the questions was, were actually these political parties merging? Which political parties were merging on the side of Jubilee Party? Because yesterday we saw the Secretary General of PNU coming out and saying that my party was not part of the merger. Number two, for CORD, they had promised us a ground-shaking announcement that never was. This is a critical matter that the media fell for it, and you saw even the hype before that event in Mombasa. But eventually, after that, they failed to tell us exactly what the big announcement was. Was it about Raila being endorsed? That wasn't news.
But was it upon the media to make the big announcement?
It wasn't upon the media.
To make the announcement. It was not us to make the announcement.
Michael,
so
the thing is,
to make an announcement.
No. Michael, the thing is, you as media houses, as experienced journalists, you should move beyond mere statements. When somebody tells you that I'm going to make a ground-shaking announcement, you must be able to interrogate that statement. My friend Ohito here, being a seasoned political reporter, and for that matter, an editor right now, he's got serious contents. You must be able to anticipate
so is
what
the
is
issue
this
that
big
there was
announcement.
No serious announcement, or we didn't report a serious
announcement? You fell for it. You
Hmm.
fell for it. You were told there will be a big announcement in Mombasa. And of course, you kept on repeating there will be a big announcement. Instead of interrogating that and asking your news sources. What is this big announcement? Move beyond mere statements. Interrogate the news sources.
Okay, I beg to differ, because I actually did ask, even Peter Kaluma was here on Thursday before the launch, and I asked him, what is the announcement? His reaction was, it's going to be a big announcement, and there's no need of me giving you the announcement now, otherwise people won't come on Saturday.
But you'll come back. Utilize your sources, Michael.
Thank you.
Right, let me come to Israel Kodiaga.
First and foremost, Michael, I think it's when you have a student of the caliber of Crispus, you give him a D. Because the question was about the media coverage of the event.
Correct.
The question had nothing to do with what ODM did do or PNU did, or it's media coverage. So a student who is so irrelevant like Crispus, to give him a D. And look at him, dressed like a Kanu Hawk. You know, he's dressed in those ties of Kanu.
I think you'll give me time to respond to that, because you'll give me my time. You'll give me my time.
You had your time, Kanu Hawk. Please now give us time to respond.
Although I'm not sure on what basis you're calling him a Kanu Hawk.
Look,
I'll respond. Don't worry, I'll respond. Don't worry, Michael. It is not up to you to respond. I will.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, when we talk about the two events, and the question was very clear, what is our opinion about the media coverage of those events? Full stop.
Correct.
It has nothing to do with your opinion of Jubilee, your opinion of ODM, and the other things. It's just our opinion of the coverage. I would say the following. One, these were two events which were taking place at the same time. And I will tell you from where I sit, the media did the very best they could do under the circumstances. One, the Kasarani event was choreographed like the Kanu Hawk as well articulated. And there are media houses which had been paid to cover the event. At that time, he who pays the piper calls the tune. Right. So the media could not go outside what they had been paid to cover. Mm-hmm. Do not forget also that the ODM event was elsewhere, and the media needed to cover that. As far as I'm concerned, I think the media did all they could under the circumstances, except that, depending on which side of the divide you stand, then you'd say you are not happy. For instance, if you belong to the stand that wanted to show the Kasarani event as successful, then whenever they shouted Jubilee, you would have been happy if they removed the word Pesa. So it actually showed that really the media didn't do a good job, because the media allowed the world to know that actually the people in Kasarani had been bought or paid to be there. That is the large majority who are unhappy with the media coverage of Kasarani, but the media was only supposed to cover. So when they say Jubilee, they say Pesa, Jubilee Pesa. Now too, coming to the ODM, it is only a very blind man who would condemn or attack the ODM event. I was there myself, I saw it. One, people came from all over the country in tens of thousands. Not a single person was stranded, not a single person was paid. There was not an issue of give us money to go back, give us money to support you. And that is really what politics is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So I do think, in fact, if there is anything that we learned from the two events, is that one is governance through buying support, and two, providing an alternative leadership on a platform of change. Mm-hmm. And in fact, what the media should have dealt with is, one, the promises that the Jubilee duo, now they were TNA that time, now they are Jubilee, promised at the time that they were taking over. 4 years down the line, what is their scorecard? 0, as far as I'm concerned. When they were at Kasarani, they were busy enumerating the many things they intended to do without telling Kenyans what they've achieved. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is a very big disaster. Mm-hmm. So if I'm just to limit myself to the media coverage of this thing, all the media ought to have done is to prosecute them and ask them, you promised children laptops when they were going to class 1. They were 6 years old. Now they are in class 5, they are 10 years old. No laptops. 2, you promised zero tolerance to corruption. Corruption has hit the ceiling. 3, you promised infrastructural development. Nothing other than the Grand Coalition projects. Okay. 4, and among the others. So basically, these are the things the media should have addressed, and not vehicles running around or people dancing around. That, to me, is very
Michael, right. would you please save us from the long lectures and winding lectures that are not relevant? Let me tell you, he's actually branded me a Kanu Hawk. I would want to say that I have no apologies to make, because Kanu is what actually gave him what he has right now. KANU is an independent political party.
Okay.
It is a party that brought him where he is right now. And it is very
I've never been a
dangerous.
member of
Wait.
For the record,
Michael, give me my time. Give me my time.
And it's not...
No. Michael,
no,
just allow me to
responded.
respond to...
You've responded
no, I've not.
And for the record, I've never been a member of KANU.
Okay.
You see, the problem is these are the dangerous ODM hawks that actually ODM should think about even having them within their ranks.
We need to stay within the confines of the newsroom, because if we start name calling and saying who is Jubilee, who is what, we'll completely lose the whole point of us being here. And here we have to look at what the media did and their coverage. David, coming back to possibly the coverage, or maybe Israel, let me first of all start with you, because you've mentioned that one of the things we should be doing is questioning Jubilee on their scorecard, on what they have done. Yes. Shouldn't we also be questioning ODM on what was it that they had said the announcement would be? Because when we look at what happened in Mombasa, we are still, trying to look for what was the big announcement. If it was announcing Raila that he's going to be the flag bearer, I think that was a given fact. For ODM, it was a given. I mean, it's a given. I do not think so. One, yes, we should be questioning Jubilee on the promises that they made, which they have not delivered on. And we cannot stop. What about ODM? We should be questioning them on their role as the opposition. And the opposition's job is to point out at the weaknesses of the government of the day. And ODM has pointed out on Eurobond. And the Auditor General now confirmed that the Eurobond money was eaten. It was never used. Two, ODM talked about the NYS scam. And everybody knows that NYS scam was so big. ODM was on the streets about the IBC. This ODM has succeeded in virtually all areas that ODM was supposed to play its role as the watchdog and as the representative of the masses.
They have not talked about corruption within their ranks.
In that respect, I would like to say ODM has performed beyond our expectations. But if there be corruption within our ranks, as this KANU hawk is trying to allege, then those ones are dealt with through the established machinery.
Professor, I would request that we refer to him as Crispus rather than the KANU hawk, because then if we're going to
he's not even in touch with our history.
Hang on.
This is not a KANU
What difference will there be between you now and politicians who literally just go name calling?
Well, I with a lot of humility, I want to really call him Crispus, but when I look at his tie, I'm scared, because it's a tie.
All right, maybe let me bring some sense into this. David, your analysis, first of all, on you've already told us what you thought on the day, but now looking at the actual events that took place, where should the media take this conversation from, given that there seems to have been an underperformance based on how much we hyped it and what happened? It really doesn't meet the bar. What is it that we should be looking at now moving forward?
I think I agree with you, Mike, and thanks for bringing the discussion back to track.
Yes.
Anyway, for Crispus, your tie, your choice. You can put on anyone. Yes. I have no problem with that.
Thank you.
There is what we call in media today issueification of content. How do we sieve issues out of the noise that happened in the two events? What really does Jubilee stand for? On day one, you're having a merger of parties that consists of individuals who are in government already and seeking another term. But there have been persistent problems in this country, even over the 4 years that they've been in office. There's the problem of corruption, as Professor mentioned. We need to see concrete action points that will be taken to try and lessen corruption. You saw the story of patients crowding the floors of our national hospital. That is what should be addressed. Why should we spend hundreds of millions to hold a one-day event rather than see how to have patients heal faster or get access to medicine? Those are the issues we should be dealing with. Then there is nearly more than half of Kenyans living below poverty, living on less than 100 shillings a day. I mean, how can we help these people improve their living standards? We have so many orphans who can't access education across the country. How can we help? Those are the issues that we should be dealing with as a country, instead of trying to say how this party will beat the other one at the election with 70%. Really doesn't make sense. And it is upon the journalists to really peg down these individuals in power and the opposition. What would you do differently if you took power today? Would you not just go to office and then we start seeing scandals coming up again? If you are in government, when you say that 97% of schools are connected to power, what is the quality of that power? Is there, I know schools that had the lines connected, but they've not seen power for the last 12 months. What is that value? What is wrong with our energy system? Those are, for me, the critical questions journalists want.
All right, Crispus, in terms of what transpired, and maybe let's look at the opposition for a moment and see what happened on the days that they were celebrating 10 at 10, but given the report that what speeches they had, do you think there was anything to celebrate? Was there anything to write home about?
I doubt whether there was actually anything to write home about, but for the sake of not raising political temperatures on this bench, because I'm seated next to, an ODM shack, I think I would want to say this.
Let's stick to the question.
I think what the media should have focused on, one, is actually the reason as to why Raila Odinga decided to cut short his trip in Western and rush to Mombasa. What were actually the achievements of his trip in Western, and what were the achievements of his trip in the coastal region? Number two, interrogate the party itself. The speeches were made, but essentially, according to me, I did not see anything relevant that was being said that had not been said before. These are the things that we must be able to interrogate as the media. Number two, there is a story that I think the media is losing plot of. That story is about the IEBC. We've already fallen behind timelines. Remember, we were supposed to have an electoral commission by end of this month, 30th.
End of September, yes.
Right now, the selection panel is not even in place. The head of state is yet even to sign the report that was passed by the Senate and the National Assembly, the report that was generated by the now defunct Joint Parliamentary Select Committee on IEBC reforms. Number three, we were supposed to be having a selection panel right now constituted that is behind timelines.
Okay.
We are seated on a serious danger as a country.
All right, allow me now to bring in Eric Latif, and thank you for joining us on the set. And I know you are offset, but you had basically what was going on here. Let's start, first of all, with the analysis of the coverage of the two events that took place over the weekend.
Well, I think, firstly, Saturday was a big day. And I think all media houses really tried, to do a live relay of what's happening on the ground at Kasarani and in Mombasa. It was a good thing. I agree with what has actually been said here, that, going over and beyond, starting to ask questions, sometimes they say that's a part two or day two story. This day we are actually just raising, we are relaying the events that are happening on the ground, and that's what's happening. Of course, during this live broadcast, then we had the panelists in the studio, and that's where the questions would come in. So Jubilee is unveiling itself as a new party today. It is as a result of dissolution of other smaller parties that are all coming up and joining and becoming one big party. So what are we unveiling? Are we unveiling just a vehicle, or are we unveiling a vehicle that has leaders? And I think among the questions that was really sticking out was, so what's the leadership of Jubilee? What's the leadership structure of Jubilee? Apart from having the party leader and deputy party leader, what are the other structures? Are we going to have, youth league, women's league? Are we going to have national? Who's going to be at the head of the national? Are we going to elect the leadership of these parties? And that's the day two kind of story coverage that, is what's happening and what should be happening now as we proceed. ODM in Mombasa, also good coverage. The thing is, people want to, everybody who's watching TV at that moment is intelligent enough to decipher for themselves what's happening. So I just want to see, right? Then tomorrow we can start now doing the analysis. Right. Or later we can start doing the analysis of what is it that we saw. Because as a media, you can't start stopping. And it's not a panel discussion where you have Joho here and Raila Odinga there and Oparanya there and start asking them questions. It's their rally. They are holding their function. You let them speak what they're saying. Later, you follow up with questions. And I think coverage on Saturday was what could have happened.
It was what was required, and really there was not much we could do. We could not fabricate anything more. Professor, in terms of now where we should be focusing on, and on both sides, Jubilee, you've already mentioned that we should be asking what's their scorecard, what is it that they've done with the opposition. We should also, what is it that we should be concentrating on, given that we're on day 3 now, or maybe even day 4?
Absolutely. I think that is really the way we need to look at these things. One, the Jubilee I've already articulated, and David has really added a lot of flesh to it. The issues that we need to ask Jubilee to actually address: security, corruption, nepotism, among many others. The opposition, ODM, we have lost the narrative somewhere. ODM was celebrating 10 years of existence. It was a birthday party. So when you're celebrating your birthday, you are both looking back at your achievements and the challenges that you have overcome. And there's no doubt they have had challenges as a party internally, they have had challenges as a party nationally, and therefore, to have survived 10 years is reason enough for them to organize the bash like they did and celebrate. 2, you see, Jubilee had to disband and repackage, meaning they could not even survive 5 years. So really surviving 10 years is a big deal. ODM came out with a resolution of their resolution as a party, and that they have a presidential candidate in the person of Raila Amolo Odinga. That is the party from ODM. Remember, Wiper had also brought out their presidential candidate. Ford Kenya has also brought out their presidential candidate. So they are saying now, go and discuss it out with their partners in the coalition. That is something that we cannot ignore. Thirdly, Jubilee has been very busy buying ODM members of parliament, ODM governors, and so on and so forth. It came out very clearly, and from Joho, that one, you are not going to succeed with the cost this time. You can buy the individuals, but they will go the Macquarie way and the rest.
Let me stop you just a bit, Professor, because here, as in the newsroom, you've made a statement and you say that Jubilee is busy buying. Now, are you also falling for what politicians have to say? What evidence and proof do you have that they have bought?
Michael, you do not need to be a rocket scientist to know what happens with these brown envelopes in this country. This thing has been
as a journalist, aren't we supposed to be at a level where we're not just operating on hearsay, but we're putting facts and figures on the table?
One thing is for a fact. If you are a whole governor of a county and you understand the meaning and the essence of devolution, then you jump out of your place and you are saying, I'm going to join those people because they're going to bring development here. It means you do not even understand the essence of devolution. What other motivation could we talk about other than being bought anyway? And there were Ukambani politicians fighting over the media of some money which was supposedly given to them 300 million to share, and 2 of them disappeared with it. So there are facts here for us all to see. You can deny it, but it is the reality. The truth of the matter is, when we talk about the event in Mombasa, that's really where I want to concentrate. It was a celebration of 10 years of major achievements, 1 as an opposition, and 2 overcoming challenges. And thirdly, preparation and readiness for the duel ahead. That is really what they did. Now, as to what the media ought to have done then, or what the media should do now, is 1, now, challenge the different political parties, whether it is ODM and Jubilee, about how they are going to go about managing their party primaries. I think that is now the critical thing which is useful for Kenyans.
Yes.
That we now think beyond the celebration. We think beyond the 10-year celebration. We think beyond the one-day celebration, and we say, okay, now you have celebrated 10 years. You have also celebrated your one-day-old. How are you going to manage the party primaries? Because we still need a united country. We do not need bloodshed in this country after, on the run-up to 2017 elections. So as Israel Kodiaga, I think these are areas which both sides of the divide must address, and address quite seriously.
Right. Michael, just a minute.
Let me hear from Eric. Okay. I think you wanted to respond.
Prof is saying something, and I think that's the same thing I was saying, that, coverage of Saturday as a live transmission, a live broadcast, ended on Saturday. After that, now the media should start asking the questions. For example, Prof is saying that, there was that unveiling of Raila Odinga as a presidential candidate. Now the questions should be, was that the right forum that should declare a party's presidential candidate?
Right.
Was that the procedure? Is that what the party stands for? Is that what the party says? Should there be a national delegates conference? Should there be voting? Was it voting by acclamation of the crowd? You know, such questions should come up. And that's why I'm saying, if we have to have democracy in this country, then we have to look at building political parties. And that's where the questions start coming in. So there's Jubilee, there's a vehicle. If it's not about personalities, all right? If it's not about Uhuru and Ruto, then this Jubilee should actually unveil to us a proper vehicle saying this is the party, these are the structures of the party. Going to 10 years celebration in Mombasa, and after that we say, okay, it's a celebration, not a delegates conference. We shall therefore call, and we propose that Raila Odinga should be the candidate, but shall be endorsed at a formal meeting. Now, if those are the questions that we should be asking, and those are the questions that we should be saying, again, looking at what Prof is saying, you know, it's plain obvious that, you know, people have been bought. I stand by what you're saying. I think it's very important as media to go with facts. Because, you know, if we don't go with facts, then we'll be carrying the country on
whims and just
on whims. It's important to say, all right, so if this governor has decided that he wants to be in a vehicle that is called Jubilee, why? And let's interrogate his reasons. And if those reasons are shallow, then the residents and the voters of Kwale will basically look at him and say, you don't have a stand. You are either swayed or whatever. But, you know, let's hear him out. Let's interrogate. Is there a moment where a political leader can say, I am moving, I am not comfortable with the ideologies of this party, I can move to this other party?
Okay. Crispus.
Yes, let me speak to one issue that came through, Professor, and I think Eric has actually touched on it as well. This question of people being bought. I think, Professor, being a student of politics or a lecturer of politics, should know better that even people being bought, those allegations, it is part of political strategy. Any strategy in politics counts. Let him accept that. By the way, Raila Odinga himself is a product of being bought. You remember Raila Odinga crossed from NDP to KANU. I don't know whether he still remembers that or he wants to assume that people don't remember that. But anyway, going forward, let me touch on the issues that we are raising. I think the question of managing political primaries or party primaries is critical. It is a pregnant question that must be addressed by the media. For instance, you've heard Jubilee Party saying that their primaries will be conducted by IEBC. CORD spoke of the same again. The question is IEBC willing and ready? What can be done to IEBC to ensure that it manages the political primaries or party primaries that we know essentially will be determining who comes in certain jurisdictions? For instance, in Nyanza, if you go in through ODM, you'll be in the Rift, in Central. If you go in through Jubilee Party, you'll essentially have been voted. So it is relevant for us to ask whether it is important for IEBC to be invited to manage, to oversee such kind of political primaries, because we know that's where IEBC will start now being hounded out of office. It will actually be a lot of mud will be thrown to IEBC before even it manages the contest itself. You've heard even CORD saying that they don't have money to ensure that they invite IEBC to conduct their party primaries. The other thing that the media should not lose focus on is actually electoral violence. And this essentially means, this is the reason as to why even in the Senate, we do not have a single woman who's an elected senator. You know, political violence in this country must be nipped in the bud. You've seen what is happening in Nyakach. I think Aduma, the MP, who's been very unfortunate. His parents were killed. I don't know whether it was last year or this year or Hito.
Last year.
Now, the previous day, his home was again attacked. You've seen Jacob Midio again was hounded from a political meeting somewhere. Was it in Alego or somewhere? You know, these are telltale signs that the country is still dancing with fire. as we approach the election, the media must put focus on that, put the spotlight on electoral violence, ask the relevant questions, and tell us whether we have institutions that can help us manage.
Ohito, electoral violence, that's an important, and that's actually where I was coming. Is there a simmering fire that possibly we could ignore, thinking it's just, from the report on Jakaya Midewe yesterday was more or less it was just goons that attacked. But of course, should we be protracting that to a bigger picture? Who are these goons? Who sent them? What is their motive? And what's the bigger picture of that? Could there be more violence? Should this be entertained?
I think I agree with you, Mike, that we really need to start paying a lot of focus on such incidents that will really take the country backwards again and throw us back to the brink. There have been incidents of violence, and particularly the Nyanza region. We saw Chilayako versus Migori Governor Obado sometime last week. Now we saw Jacoyo Midio. I don't know who the enemies were. And now you've also seen the attack on Honorable Aduma. But we've also seen cases where a water minister who is trying to leave his job to be Governor Nairobi, chased away from some corners of Nairobi, is unable to hold meetings. And I think these are very bad signs that are showing us we are not having it right yet. Why can't we mature our democracy? If ODM is at 10, they should be telling us we want to hold party nominations that are free from such incidents of violence, and where people can come and freely express themselves. There's freedom of expression, freedom of speech, enshrined in the Constitution. And the party leadership should be watching this keenly. If there are culpable individuals, then the law should take its course. And if at all a party is serious enough, then even penalties within the party structures should be spelled out.
Okay. Yes,
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. We should not oversimplify the matter of electoral violence and look at a few cases which are very recent. Otherwise, we will not be solving the problem. Electoral violence in this country is traceable back to actually 1988. After 1983 elections, which was the last election where all candidates were usually would come together and sell their policies to the crowd and then walk away. The moment that the government allowed individuals to reach out to their supporters individually, that actually marked the genesis of electoral violence in a huge sense. So one, when we are addressing electoral violence in this country, we must look at it in certain prisms. Number one, we look at electoral violence from state organs. And then we look at electoral violence across inter-parties, inter-coalition, say Jubilee CORD, and then electoral violence intra-party within the party, then electoral violence within a smaller polity. Now, when you look at it from state organs, you would see very well that the state organs, particularly the police, have been complicit in electoral violence. And if you look at even how they were handling the demonstrations of IEBC in the so-called CORD ODM strongholds, that shows you violence by the state on the people. You understand? Where they were out shooting and killing innocent Kenyans. So if the state organs who are supposed to protect the citizenry are involved in violence against the citizenry, then there we have a serious problem, because the people have no one to run to. And the state organs, particularly the police and now you know the NYS, they have recruited a new group, cadre of NYS. I am a product of NYS as a pre-university student then, but the group that collected from the slums and then taken for some few months course and then given uniform to go back to the villages are a potential militia and danger. So these are things that need to be addressed. Two, electoral violence inter-party. For example, as we are today in Kenya, anybody who found putting on Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta's T-shirt along Jubilee Market in Kisumu or Kondele, or anybody found putting on Raila Odinga's T-shirt in Nyeri should be arrested and charged for attempted suicide. Because the country has been polarized to a point that the mere to be seen with that It's really...
Professor, is that really factual?
Yes, I am telling you, because do not forget that when Raila himself visited Nyeri during Kibaki's time, he was campaigning, he had to be thrown out of an hotel by some proprietor because he represented an ideology or an ideal that was an anathema in that place. So I'm simply telling you, you can close your eyes as the media if you wish, but the truth is, the country is so polarized to a point that if you are seen in that T-shirt in those places, I think the police should arrest you for attempted suicide because you are going to die anyway. So that is electoral violence, inter-party.
Okay.
Now,
Michael, you need to be very careful with these propagandists.
Now, the third aspect of
these are
electoral
monolithic
violence
thinkers whose ideas must not be
electoral
left
violence
to be
within
told
the
on
party,
national TV.
with the so-called party hopping rule, we have actually given electoral violence a higher notch. Because what it means is that so many people, if the parties do not manage their primaries correctly,
do or die,
then it would be a do or die. Meaning, I spend my resources, I contest against Oito, and if the primaries are botched, for instance, and Oito gets the ticket, then chances are, and God forbid, that there will be a lot of violence within the parties, So I want to say that to address electoral violence, we must ensure that the ground is even, right from the national and to within the parties. And if we do not manage that, then it is a prescription for chaos.
David Ohito, you wanted to respond to that. I'll come to you, Eric.
Yes, I think as a media, we have a duty to preach peace and tolerance across society. And we cannot say and rubber stamp thoughts like when you wear a T-shirt of Jubilee in Kisumu, then you're on your way to suicide. No. We must start telling Kenyans that this is our country, that we must bring down borders. The way the poor person in Kisumu pays taxes is the same way the poor person in Kiambu and Nyeri does. And therefore, we should just be preaching, how can we elect good leaders to take this country forward? I think as media houses, we have the honors to keep on preaching the need for peace and tolerance in our political environment.
All right. Eric?
I completely agree with what Ohito is saying. I think, and I've said this many times, whenever we talk about, this country is polarized, and we keep repeating that, we are basically buttressing the same message. The issue, whether we are polarized or not, we are not polarized. We think we are, and we shouldn't be thinking that we are, because you have an independent of thought. If you choose to elect a certain person, you have your reason why you want to elect that person. And you cannot say that because I supported Michael, I'm therefore polarized against Ohito, who does not support Michael.
No, Michael, I think this is armchair philosophy now. What I think I've been misunderstood.
Let me finish my thoughts. And I think the future, or the solution to all these issues of constant electoral violence or electoral-related violence is strengthening of the independent institutions. And we have to get to that point. We have to get to a point where the DPP actually feels independent. We have to get to a point where NCIC feels independent and can do a job and does not feel like it's been, we all don't feel like it's being controlled or it's a puppet of somebody else. We have to get to a point where IEBC is EBC. It must be. When we start now pulling in politics to try and control IEBC, then it loses that independence. The moment we have independent institutions, then that's a case where if somebody actually is going to another party's stronghold, they feel protected. And they feel,
Michael, I need to clarify this point. As a professor, it is my duty to express the situation as it is, no matter how unpalatable it may be. The situation in this country, what my brother is bringing is the ideal where we should be heading. What David Ohito is providing the solution, what we ought to be doing. But the situation where we are today, the country is that polarized. And anybody closing his eyes to that one is the one who is sending this country to the
As a professor, then I'm sure you would have facts and figures or reasons as to why you say that. Why do you think we're that polarized?
We are this polarized because to date, politics has not been about issues in this country. Our allegiance to political parties have more to do with the tribes that we come from, the strongmen that come from our tribes, and of course our turn to eat mentality, as opposed to politics that is rallying Kenyans together.
But
then what is leading us? I've said this
Michael,
many times on this forum.
Hang on.
Wait, I've said this many times in this forum that as long as we practice politics of exclusivity.
Professor, allow me to stop you right there, because you've talked about us looking at tribes and all that, yet you're the same person who's talking about Yankem because of his tie. Simply because of his tie, you've called him a Kanu Hawk, whatever that is supposed to mean.
Well,
aren't you the people who are literally polarizing us by your way of thinking?
Let me tell you, I am a graduate of the Nyayo torture chambers and the Nyati House chambers in the hands of the Kanu Hawk. So anytime I see this type of tie, I have to shiver. Because what I witnessed in their hands...
Michael, just give me time. Please, give me time.
All right,
you know, we
Christmas.
cannot keep on being treated to this verbal diarrhea on this particular show. We must actually rise above certain issues, petty issues. I've said time and again, this is not a Kanu tie. I think Professor must socialize himself with the history of this country and know how our flag looks like. That is critical. Number two, it actually worries me when Professor talks the way he's talking. And this is a lecturer who apparently lectures in a certain institutions. We must be able to question what kind of ideology he's preaching.
You cannot question.
No. That is quite relevant. That is quite
relevant. You are not qualified.
No.
You are not qualified.
Professor, you know, you've actually pushed me that far. The problem is, he's actually pushed me that far. So I must be able to respond.
You are not qualified. In fact,
no, because we are
you are an intellectual when it comes to some of these things.
Okay, that's
Gentlemen, can we stick to the newsroom? The issues we want to discuss is how the media should have projected and would be looking at. Whether he's Kanu, Jubilee, that's not important to us right now, but rather how the media has covered that. Let me come to you, David, because I think this end there seems to be...
I was coming to the way the media has...
No, you have to be ready.
I need you to be brief because we are also running out of time. Crispus.
Okay. Let Ohito respond.
All right. Ohito,
yes.
Moving forward, looking at what has happened and the fact that we seem to still be polarized at an individual level, what responsibility and how can the media ensure that, like Eric mentioned, we have a responsibility to ensure that we give people information, but at the same time, not keep people at a point where we are polarizing them?
I think I agree with that, the approach that the media has, so cardinal rules to preach peace and also preach tolerance, the need for a democratic, free society where people can express themselves freely. Let the campaigns come, but allow CORD people to go and campaign in Kiambu Nyeri if they want, and allow Jubilee Party to come to Kisumu and Kisii and Coast, and let them request for votes. Let them convince people with their policies, ideas, and manifestos that we are the better side, that you can entrust with the leadership of this country. I think if we do that, we will be nurturing our democracy in the right direction. But if we keep polarizing and scaring people alongside their political alignments, I think we will miss the point, and there will be no difference with 2007, 2008 when we lost the country. But as journalists, let's identify issues. Who stands for what? What really does the 3-day-old Jubilee Party stand for? Can they do things differently from what we've seen over the 4 years? Can they clamp down on corruption this time under the new banner? Can we have, a vetting system where we have selfless leaders who can serve this country better? Okay. If we go that direction, I think we can make a whole difference.
All right,
Michael,
go on.
Yeah, I think the media in this
closing comments.
Yeah, the media in this country has come of age. We must actually credit the media for the kind of events that we are seeing, because most of these coverage are actually speaking to the issues. We've not forgotten 2008. We've not forgotten 2007. And 2013, the media had an opportunity of fixing the mess. They did that. As we head into 2017, I think that is the critical question. And I'm seeing the media is actually on track to ensuring the country is held together. Number two, I think the media will do a lot of service to itself if you blend the old and the young, the experienced and the inexperienced.
To have that history of what's been coming.
Yeah, because that is critical. When you see the issues that are emerging, that is actually critical for you to ensure that that is done so that you have institutional memory.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eric, closing comments?
What I'd say is, I think coming into the next election, the media is basically prepared for it. And I say this because if you look at the coverage that we've had in the last, let's say, 15 or 20 years, the last 4 elections, the issues are emerging now. It's more about issues and what a leader stands for, what a leader's stand has been on a certain issue or throughout their history. And I think that's what's going to be emerging in this. And the best thing that I think has happened is when political leaders agreed to come up with this no party hopping rule. Because without party hopping, it means that now we'll be looking at the electorate will be electing a leader based on what they like about that leader.
I'll have to cut you short because of time. I'm told we are really out of time. Professor, I know you wanted to...
The media has come of age thanks to the gallant work of Raila Odinga, Anyang' Nyong'o,
we'll have to
and many other gallant stars of this country.
Well, that's where we wind up Morning Express, or rather not Morning Express, but Newsroom this morning. For those of us on KTN Home, we'll say goodbye.